Darius Ellington didn't walk into his restaurant as an owner that day. He walked in as a stranger with worn jeans, a faded hoodie, and pain already forming behind the calm in his eyes. Nobody inside recognized him. Not the cashier, not the server, not even the cook who owed his life to the kitchen Darius built. The grill was packed, but the warmth Ellie once poured into every booth was missing. The cornbread still smelled sweet, but the smiles were sour. Gossip floated above the clatter of plates, louder than the country music spilling through the speakers. And then came the sentence that cut through him sharper than the cold. The owner? He don't come around. Just another rich dude. Darius didn't argue, didn't even flinch. He ordered a sandwich he'd never eat, heard his own legacy dismissed in casual, careless tones, and walked out, jaw clenched. Because in that moment, Ellie's Grill, the place he built to honor his grandmother, felt nothing like home. But you don't rebuild a soul with orders. You start by listening. Darius walked the alley behind his own restaurant, just as the cooks took their smoke breaks. A cracked kitchen window fed him everything he needed to hear. Marina's gum smacked loud, her voice louder. Kendall laughed like the whole thing was a joke. But then, he started this place with $200 and a smoker in his driveway. Reggie said. Silence. Reggie's voice was low, but firm. Show some respect. That stopped them. Briefly. Darius leaned back from the window, torn between pride for Reggie and shame for what his absence had let grow. Ellie used to say, "You can't plant a garden and forget to water it. Don't matter how good the seeds are." He'd stopped watering, stopped showing up, and it had festered. The next morning, 9 o'clock sharp, they gathered. This time, Darius didn't hide. No hoodie, no disguise, just a clean shirt, worn jeans, and the weight of a legacy too important to let rot. He let silence fill the room before speaking. This place is named after Ellie Mae Ellington, my grandmother. If you'd ever met her, you'd understand why this isn't just a job to me. His voice never raised. It didn't need to. I built this place to feel like her kitchen, warm, forgiving, honest. But yesterday, I walked in and didn't recognize what we'd become. He pointed to the same counter where he'd stood, invisible. I heard things no owner wants to hear, and I saw what happens when leadership turns into absence. That's on me. But the disrespect, the gossip, that's on you. Then came the decision. You want to stay? Show me. With actions. If you can't, you're free to leave. No shame. But don't stand here wasting time or tarnishing her name. That day didn't fix everything, but it cracked open the floor. And through that crack, light started to pour in. Tiana started greeting customers like friends. Reggie moved through the kitchen like a symphony conductor. Marina, awkward at first, stood a little taller. Kendall stayed quiet but watchful. Then Isaiah walked in. A young man, fresh from the shelter program, wearing fear like a second skin. He clutched his order slip like a lifeline. Reggie stepped forward. You got this. And Marina? She didn't mock. She didn't ignore. She rang him up. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Darius watched. Silent. Still. But present. The next day, 2 folders sat on the counter. One for those who would stay. Another for those who needed to leave. With dignity. Reggie signed first. No hesitation. This place saved me. Time to return the favor. Charisse signed next. Then Tiana. One by one, the foundation rebuilt itself. But not everyone stayed. Marina sat across from Darius, unsure. Her voice shook. I think I need to go. You need people chasing purpose, not paychecks. He nodded. Thank you for your honesty. That matters too. Kendall came in late. Said little, but his form slid across the counter. I'm staying. I'll earn it this time. Darius didn't smile. He just nodded. Then don't make me regret it. By week's end, the bell above the door rang again with joy. The rhythm returned. Booths filled. Meals warmed more than bellies. And one man, new corporate, briefcase in hand, sat at the window booth, unsure. Tiana smiled. Catfish is best today. Just saying. He smiled back. That night, a handwritten note appeared on the counter. Been coming here since y'all opened. Thought I lost the feeling when it changed. But today, it felt like Ellie again. Darius folded it, placed it in his back pocket. "We're still watering, Grandma," he whispered, and walked back inside. Because this place, this spirit, wasn't rebuilt by walls or walls alone. It was rebuilt by people brave enough to choose better. 2 weeks later, the midday light poured through the front windows of Ellie's grill, laying golden stripes across freshly polished wood. Reggie's laughter echoed from the kitchen. Charisse was humming. And Darius? He stood near the entrance, clipboard in hand, quietly checking inventory logs against real-life flow. Then the door creaked. He looked up. A tall woman stepped inside, late 50s maybe, slender frame dressed in a dark emerald trench, gray streaks woven through her coils, her eyes sharp but tired. She moved like someone who traveled far with purpose. "Table for one?" Tiana asked, smiling warmly. The woman nodded slowly. "Window seat, if you don't mind." Darius squinted. Something about her was familiar, not her face, but the energy. When she sat, she didn't order right away. Instead, she opened a leather-bound notebook and laid a single fountain pen across the top. Old school. She glanced around the room, scanning not just the menu, but the staff, the mood, the rhythm. It wasn't just curiosity. It was measurement. Darius walked over. "Welcome to Ellie's. You visiting from out of town?" She looked up and smiled, soft, unreadable. "I used to live here. Long time ago. Thought I'd check in on something old." He extended a hand. "Darius. Owner." Her eyes flicked to the framed photo of Ellie on the wall. "Ellington, huh?" she said quietly. Darius tilted his head. "You knew her." She didn't answer right away, just stared at the photo. Then, better than most. That evening, after the rush, Darius found a note on the table where she'd sat. It wasn't a tip. It was a letter. "Your grandmother, Ellie Mae, wrote to me in 1979. Said I'd left something in her kitchen. Something bigger than pride. She said forgiveness wasn't a gift, it was a skill." I never replied. I was young and angry. But now, I'm older. And it turns out, grief don't care about decades. Thank you for keeping this place alive. I'm not ready to share everything, but I will be back. No name. Just a pressed camellia tucked in with a note. Darius held it for a long time, the edges trembling in his grip. He knew Ellie's camellias. She only gave them to people who had carried weight and chosen to lay it down. Who was she? And what had she left behind in Ellie's kitchen all those years ago? Charisse knocked gently on Darius's office door a few days later. "Hey, someone dropped this off. Said it's connected to your grandma." Inside the folder was a faded black and white photo. Ellie, standing with 2 younger women, arms draped over shoulders, laughing in front of a food truck. Written on the back in pen, "Mavis, Ellie, and Joe. 1978. We survived. We served." Mavis. Darius stepped back like he'd been struck. Mavis LaRue was one of the most controversial food critics in Georgia history. Hard, respected, and brutally honest. She vanished from the public decades ago after a series of reviews sparked political backlash. Now he was sure. The woman who'd sat in his diner 2 days ago wasn't just a critic. She was Ellie's oldest friend, and she had come back with a question buried in grief. That night, Darius unlocked the basement archives, boxes of recipes, journals, letters, and photos Ellie had left behind. Dust rose with every lid cracked. He pulled out an envelope labeled simply, "Mavis." Inside, a handwritten recipe with no ingredients. Just one line. Tell her it was never about the food. It was always about the people. Darius sat down, heart pounding. Something deeper was hidden here. Something unfinished. And he knew. If he didn't find out what tore them apart back then, it might tear something else apart now. Just then, his phone buzzed. A new reservation. Name M. LaRue. Time 9 a.m., one guest. Note. This time, I'll tell you everything. Darius arrived early, hours before sunrise. The air inside Ellie's grill still clung to the night, thick with silence and old memories. He stood at the prep counter, coffee in hand, the scent mingling with aged paper and a dusting of flour. At exactly 8:57 a.m., the door creaked open. Mavis LaRue stepped in, the same emerald coat folded over her arm this time, her presence quiet but unshaken. She nodded to Tiana, who led her without a word to the booth near the wall of black and white photographs, the one with Ellie at the center. Darius joined her moments later, sliding into the seat across from her. Mavis didn't speak at first. She simply placed her notebook on the table and rested her hand over it. "You ever lose a sister and never grieve it?" she asked finally, voice like smoke, soft but burned at the edges. Darius stared at her. "Ellie," Mavis nodded slowly. "We weren't blood, but we bled through the same years. We started out in kitchens that didn't want us, cooked for folks who wouldn't seat us, shared dreams behind locked doors and recipes on napkins." She opened the notebook, revealing an old photograph glued inside. Ellie and Mavis, arms linked, faces lit with youthful defiance. And then came the night everything changed. It was a humid August night, Mavis said, when everything came undone. She and Ellie had just pitched their co-owned food truck concept to a group of white investors in downtown Atlanta. The men liked Ellie's smile, but not her fire. They liked Mavis's precision, but not her pride. When the investors offered a deal, it came with strings. Ellie could stay on as the face. Mavis quietly cut. Ellie refused. "We don't split our recipes, or our names." But Mavis walked, not out of anger at Ellie, out of shame. "I couldn't handle being the one they didn't want," Mavis admitted. "I left before I could be left, and I never said goodbye." Darius felt the weight of those words, the raw edges of a friendship undone by forces bigger than either woman. Mavis closed the notebook. "I watched from a distance as she built this place, reviewed it under a pseudonym once, gave it 5 stars. She never knew." Her voice cracked. "I thought I had more time." Darius slid the envelope across the table. "Ellie wrote you." She never stopped waiting. Mavis opened it with shaking hands. The single line hit her like a prayer. It was never about the food. It was always about the people. Tears welled in her eyes. She folded the letter slowly, then pressed her hand to her chest. "She forgave me, before I even asked." They sat in silence for a while, letting the moment breathe. As the lunch crowd began to stir, Mavis stood. "Let me do something," she said. "One meal. One recipe. For her." Darius blinked. "You want to cook?" "No," she said, lips curling into the first smile he'd seen. "I want to teach." That evening, Ellie's Kitchen hosted a private staff session. Mavis taught Tiana and Charisse how to make Ellie's forgotten sweet potato hush puppies. She told stories, with each fold of batter, each sprinkle of spice. "Food," she said, "is what we carry when we forget how to say sorry." Reggie watched quietly from the side, eyes glinting. Kendall showed up late, but he watched too. That night, Darius returned to the basement. Mavis's confession stirred something deeper. He dug through one final box he hadn't opened in years. Inside was a sealed envelope addressed to Joanne, the third woman in the photo. "We survived. We served." But Joanne had vanished. Darius knew then this story wasn't finished, and Ellie's grill wasn't done teaching lessons. The morning after Mavis's lesson in the kitchen, the diner buzzed with energy, but Darius felt a thread unraveling beneath it all. That name on the envelope, Joanne. He sat in his office, the envelope on the desk in front of him, unopened. Written in Ellie's unmistakable script, faded but clear. Joanne Holloway, Atlanta General, West Ward. Mavis knocked gently, then entered. "You found something." He handed it to her. "Recognize it?" Mavis stared at the name for a long time. "She was the one who made us believe we could win," she said. "Jo was the voice when Ellie got quiet, when I got reckless." She sat down. "But Jo got sick. Something in her lungs. Hospitals said it was environmental. She got moved to a ward we couldn't access. Just like that, she was gone. Letters returned unopened. Ellie never stopped writing. I gave up." Darius turned the envelope over slowly. "Do you want to open it?" Mavis shook her head. "You should." Inside was a single page, dated 1984. "Dear Jo, if this finds you, know we kept the kitchen warm." Mavis tried to stay mad. But you'd laugh if you saw how quick she softened when I made your peach-glazed ribs. The ones with the cracked pepper trick only you knew. I hope you're safe. I hope you're healing. And if you're not, know this. We didn't forget. You are stitched into every plate that leaves our window. We miss you. We love you. Come home when you can. Ellie. Mavis wiped a tear. She wrote that when we opened the first brick and mortar, after Joe didn't show for the grand opening. Darius leaned back, breath heavy. She's still out there. Maybe, Mavis said. Maybe not, but we owe it to her to look. That night, Reggie brought in an old customer who worked custodial at Atlanta General in the 80s. I remember Joanne, the man said. She was sweet, real smart, had a wheeze in her laugh, always carried a book. Darius showed him the photo. That's her. He paused. Wait, she ain't dead. I seen her a few years back. She was volunteering over at St. Mark's Shelter on Auburn. Changed her name, I think. Started going by Joe Pierce. Mavis clutched the photo. She's alive. Darius nodded. And I'm going to find her. St. Mark's Shelter smelled of fresh coffee and floor polish. The volunteers wore name tags. Darius scanned every face until one voice behind him said, "Looking for someone?" He turned. A woman in her early 60s, silver-streaked braids, strong posture, sharp gaze. She wore a faded apron that read, "Feed the soul, not just the stomach." He showed her the photo. She stared for a long moment. "Ellie," she whispered. He nodded. "You're Joanne, aren't you?" She hesitated, then gave the smallest smile. "Depends who's asking." He stepped forward. "Her grandson." She pressed a hand over her mouth. "Oh, Lord, I thought I'd never hear that name again." 2 days later, Ellie's grill opened before sunrise. The team moved like clockwork, Charisse prepping sweet potatoes, Reggie firing up the grills, and Kendall unloading crates at the back. Darius stepped through the front door, wearing his signature blazer, the same one he wore the first day he took over. But today, someone else walked in behind him. Joanne. She wore a tan trench, her silver braids pulled neatly behind her. She paused at the door like a woman stepping into a photograph. Eyes lifted. The staff froze. Mavis emerged from the back, and for a second, time collapsed. 2 women, once inseparable, stood 10 feet apart, then 5, then 1. No words, just an embrace. Mavis whispered into her shoulder, "I thought you were gone." Joe held tighter. "I was." But Ellie left a map. That afternoon, Darius gathered the staff. "This is Joe. She's family. Not just to me. To this place." Reggie nodded. Charisse offered a smile. "But Kendall?" He folded his arms. "Another legend, huh?" he muttered. Joe heard it. She stepped forward. "Want to see if the legend still cooks?" The room chuckled nervously. "Let's cook." For the first time in years, Joe slipped on an apron with her name on it, stitched by Mavis in another lifetime. Together, they recreated Ellie's long-lost Friday special, mustard braised ribs with pickled okra and molasses-glazed cornbread. By dinner, the scent danced through the dining room like music. Customers whispered. One older man clutched his chest. "Smells like 1982, he said. "That's the real deal." That night, Joe lingered in the hallway by the staff photo wall. Her finger touched the frame of the 1978 photo, the one with all 3 of them. "We never got our ending," she whispered. Mavis joined her. "Maybe this is the beginning instead." Joe turned. "There's something else you should know." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small tin. Inside, a folded piece of paper. Yellowed. Handwritten. Ellie's handwriting. She gave me this when I left the hospital. Told me to open it when I found my voice again. Mavis opened it. Read aloud. "The soul of any kitchen isn't the food. It's the people willing to come back, even after they've burned it." Joe looked up. "I'm ready to stay this time." It started with a phone call. A producer named Fiona Tate, from a rising documentary series called American Hearths, said she'd heard whispers of Ellie's grill. Not just the food, but the story. A legacy rebuilt. Women reunited. Recipes recovered. "We want to feature it." Darius hesitated. Exposure could mean growth or exploitation. But Joe said it best. If we don't tell our stories, someone else will, and they won't get it right. So he agreed. Cameras arrived the following week. Boom mics hovered over the sizzling grill. A camerawoman captured Reggie plating catfish with the precision of an artist. Mavis did an on-camera tasting of Hush Puppies with a dry joke that cracked up the crew. But Joe was quiet. They wanted her story. What was it like leaving, then coming back? Fiona asked. Joe stared at the lens, her voice soft. It was like stepping back into a room I set on fire and finding the ashes had grown roots. The camera operator lowered his gear, visibly moved. The tension started subtle. Charisse wasn't used to working with a mic clipped to her collar. Kendall became stiff under the spotlight. Darius noticed plates coming out slower, laughter fading. And one morning, a whisper. They're here to tell the happy ending. But this story ain't done. It came from the dishwasher, Malik, quiet, observant, new. He'd been watching everything. Late one night, Fiona stayed behind to review footage and stumbled across something raw. A conversation caught by a hot mic. Kendall talking to a friend near the alley. Man, they treat this place like a church. But half of them just learning how not to burn toast. And Joe, she left once. What's to say she won't bounce again? Fiona flagged the clip. The next day, she brought it to Darius privately. He watched it once, then again, not out of anger, but out of clarity. It's not about who leaves, he said quietly. It's about who returns changed. He didn't fire Kendall. Instead, he played the clip for the whole team. This is the mirror, he said. Now, what are we going to do with it? The next week was different. Kendall apologized. On camera, off camera, in every way that mattered. Charisse pulled Malik into a training shift, teaching him plating techniques. And Joe, she spoke directly into the lens. Redemption isn't neat. It's loud and smoky and full of broken eggs. But if you listen, it tells you when to flip something before it's too far gone. Fiona smiled. That's the ending. Joe shook her head. That's the beginning. The documentary aired on a Sunday night. By Monday, Ellie's grill was buzzing like it hadn't in years. Locals, tourists, foodies, and curiosity chasers lined up out the door. The phone rang nonstop. Social media lit up. A Southern gem rediscovered. 3 women. 1 legacy. Unforgettable. But at 2:47 p.m., a man walked in that changed everything. Tall, mid-60s, dressed in a slate wool coat and dark slacks, a leather briefcase in hand. His eyes scanned the room with precision. Then they stopped on the wall of photos. He moved slowly, like the floor was sacred. Joe noticed him first. Her brow furrowed. Mavis stood behind the counter, watching. Darius stepped out from the office. The man turned. I'm looking for Darius Ellington. That's me, Darius replied. The man extended a hand. I believe I'm Ellie's son. They sat in the back booth. The stranger placed a photo on the table. Ellie, holding a baby. Dated June 1963. Darius stared. My mother never spoke of having a child before my dad. She didn't, the man replied. I was adopted. Found out late. Traced records. I have no proof except this. He pulled out a small box. Inside was a locket engraved YH to MS. Mavis gasped. She wore that until she gave it away. Joe whispered. She said she had to give up something precious once. We never asked. Darius studied the man. He wasn't sure if he felt anger, confusion, or something more dangerous. Hope. What's your name? Malcolm. The next day, the team gathered. Darius told them everything. Showed them the photo. The locket. He could be lying. Or he could be family. Reggie folded his arms. And if he is, what then? Joe said quietly. Then we find room at the table. But Malik, dishwasher, listener, leaned forward. Truth is heavy. If it's real, it'll stay standing. Mavis nodded slowly. Ellie always said, blood don't make a family, but truth makes it worth staying. Malcolm returned the next morning. He arrived early, before the prep crew, wearing the same slate coat, but this time with a manila folder under his arm. He sat in the same booth, where he had introduced himself. Darius slid into the seat across from him. You said you had more. Malcolm opened the folder slowly. Inside were 5 handwritten letters, preserved in protective sleeves, all addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Shepard, his adoptive parents. Ellie wrote these between 1964 and 1970, he explained. My mother kept them in a jewelry box. I didn't find them until after she passed. Darius lifted the top letter. Does he still like sweet potatoes? He had a nose wrinkle when they were too spicy. I hope he's happy. That's all I ask. Mavis read silently beside them, eyes brimming. Joe whispered, She never stopped being his mother. Malcolm nodded. There's one more thing. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a creased envelope. It had no return address, but the name written on it, Isaiah Holloway. Darius blinked. Holloway. Joe froze. That's my brother's name. That night, Joe couldn't sleep. The name stirred ghosts she thought she'd buried. Isaiah Holloway, Joe's older brother, had vanished from her life after a prison sentence in the early 80s. He'd been angry, wild, protective of Joe after she got sick. But when he left Atlanta, no one heard from him again. Mavis stayed beside her at the table, silent, holding her hand. Why would Ellie be writing him? Joe asked. Maybe she was keeping tabs, Mavis said. Or maybe Isaiah's story was never over either. Joe stood. I need to find him. Darius, listening from the hallway, stepped in. Then we find him together. Joe and Darius began at the Fulton County Archives. The staff there, older and polite, dug through records on microfilm while the two sat side by side, watching the reels spin with decades of forgotten ink. Isaiah Holloway's name appeared twice, both times tied to correctional facility transfers. In 1983, he'd been moved to a federal prison in Alabama, and in 1986, he'd been released. No forwarding address, no follow-up. He disappeared by choice, Joe whispered, but the trail wasn't entirely cold. A faint lead emerged, a church outreach ledger from the late 90s, signed by a man calling himself Isaac Hill. Joe's brother's birth name was Isaiah Hill Holloway. The church, Greater Pines Baptist in Montgomery. They drove through Georgia at dawn. Mavis stayed behind, manning the grill. Reggie ran the kitchen. Joe rode up front with Darius, clutching a photo Ellie had once taken of Isaiah, laughing beside a car with a busted headlight. They arrived at Greater Pines under gray skies. The sanctuary was closed, but a groundskeeper, thin, hunched, kind, recognized the name. Brother Isaac, he said, squinting. He leads the Friday night circle down at Jefferson Commons. Sober 12-step and scripture. Joe's breath caught. He's still here. Like clockwork. Jefferson Commons was a worn building tucked behind a hardware store. Inside, chairs circled under flickering lights. The scent of coffee and hope filled the room. At 6:02 p.m., a man stepped in. Late 60s. Broad shoulders. Salt and pepper beard. Eyes that once burned hot, now flickered with quiet. Joe stood. He froze. Joe, he rasped. Hi, big brother. He walked slowly, as if afraid she'd vanish. They hugged. Long shaking. Breathing. You found me, he said. Ellie never stopped looking. Isaiah, or Brother Isaac, as he was now known, stood at the edge of the dining room, hat in hand. It was his first time back at Ellie's grill in over 40 years. Reggie greeted him with a quiet nod. Mavis came around the counter and simply opened her arms. He embraced her like a man clutching forgiveness. I never thought I'd see this place again, he said. Neither did we, Mavis whispered. Joe guided him to the corner booth. Darius brought over 2 plates, Ellie's mustard braised ribs and pickled okra. Isaac stared at the food, eyes misting. She kept her word, he murmured. She always said she'd save me a seat. That night, after hours, Joe and Isaac sat alone in the back hallway. The kitchen lights dimmed, the air filled with quiet clinks of dishes being dried. I need to tell you something, he said, about the night I left. Joe sat up. I was supposed to protect you, but after you got sick, I started blaming everyone, even Ellie. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded envelope. I sent this, but I never knew if she got it. Joe opened it slowly. Inside was a letter scrawled in rough handwriting. I'm sorry for everything. I couldn't carry the weight, but I never stopped praying for you. I'll be someone worth coming home to. Tears slipped down her cheek. She never told me. She didn't need to. Isaac said. She forgave me anyway. That's what made her different. 2 days later, a manila envelope arrived by courier. No return address. Inside was a scanned legal document. A last addendum to Ellie's will, dated 2010. The document listed a fourth name. Sole remaining heir to Ellie Mae Ellington's land and original recipe book, Isaiah Hill Holloway. Darius, Joe, and Mavis stood in the office in stunned silence. She left it all to him? Joe asked. Darius scanned the paper again. No, she left it in trust to him. Which means? He never knew. Mavis finished. The grill wasn't just Ellie's. It had been waiting for Isaiah all along. 3 days after the legal documents arrived, Ellie's grill was busier than ever, but the back office was quieter than it had ever been. Darius stared at a folder marked Franchise Proposal, its thick contents branded with a corporate logo. Golden Fork Group, he muttered. They want 6 locations across Georgia in 2 years. Isaiah sat across from him, hands folded. 6 Ellies? Without Ellie. Mavis walked in with a pot of coffee, setting it down hard. Her name isn't just a label, it's a story. They don't want her soul. They want her sparkle. Joe remained silent for a moment. Ellie taught us to feed people's spirit, not just their stomachs. Darius closed the folder. Then maybe we tell them no. Later that night, Reggie was repairing a loose board near the old back pantry when something caught his eye. Tucked behind insulation, wrapped in wax paper, was a small leather-bound book. He brought it to Joe. Found it behind the wall, right under the spice shelf. Joe opened the book. It wasn't a cookbook. It was Ellie's personal journal, pages filled with her thoughts on food, loss, second chances, and a series of coded recipes marked for Isaiah. She was preparing him, Joe whispered, even when she didn't know if he'd come back. Mavis took the book reverently. She was leaving him a map. The next morning, Isaiah stood in the center of the kitchen, holding Ellie's journal. Staff gathered quietly around him. I spent most of my life thinking I wasn't good enough to be remembered, he said. But she remembered me in every page, every flavor, every lesson. He opened to a section titled Courage Stew. Let's cook, he said. Joe smiled, stepped up beside him. Reggie handed him an apron. The team got to work, cutting, boiling, tasting. Not for customers, not for the cameras, but for the promise of a woman who believed in second chances. The next staff meeting wasn't called. It happened naturally. After lunch, in the lull between rushes, they all found themselves gathered in the dining room, the old radio humming low. Darius stood in front of the counter, Ellie's journal in one hand, the franchise folder in the other. We've come far, he said, and now we have a choice. Joe stood beside him. We can stay small, rooted, or we can grow, with control, with heart. Charisse asked, can we do both? Isaiah spoke gently. Not if we lose the recipe for why we started. Mavis added, legacy doesn't scale easy, but it can stretch if the hand shaping it stay true. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Kendall raised his hand. Then we choose who carries it. We build it slow. Ourselves. No big money. Just big faith. Darius nodded. Then that's what we do. Over the next month, they made plans, not for a franchise, but for a collective. Local training kitchens, pop-ups at churches, food truck mentorships, a pilot location in Savannah, run by Charisse and Malik. They called it Ellie's Table. Not just a name, a reminder. Every plate told a story. Late one evening, Joe returned to the pantry. She opened the loose panel Reggie had repaired. Behind it, where the journal was found, was a second slip of paper, folded small. It read, if you're reading this, you made it. Don't let this place become a brand. Let it stay a promise. Feed them with more than food. Feed them with hope. Ellie. Joe closed her eyes, then tucked the note in her apron pocket and walked back into the kitchen. The soft launch of Ellie's Table was simple. No streamers, no speeches. Just warm plates, familiar smiles, and handwritten thank you notes tucked inside each to-go order. Word spread quickly, but not everyone was cheering. On the west end of town, a slick soul fusion restaurant called Hearthline posted a thinly veiled dig on social media. Old recipes are nice nostalgia, but innovation feeds the future. Hashtag real flavor forward. Charisse showed the post to Darius. He read it, set his phone down, and said, "Latching cookie. We'll just cook better." That evening, just as the last customer left, a black SUV pulled into the lot. A man stepped out, mid-50s, sharp suit, the kind that says money without saying respect. Darius Ellington? Who's asking? Gordon Banks, founder of Taste Corp. We met a long time ago. You turned down my seed money after culinary school. Darius folded his arms. I remember. Banks smiled. I'm not here to reminisce. I'm here with a proposition. He reached into his briefcase and dropped a file onto the host's stand. I want to license Ellie's table. We'll expand to 5 cities. We'll keep your name up front, but you step aside on operations. Joe, watching from the kitchen window, froze. And if I say no? Darius asked. Banks shrugged. Then we open something like it, next door, with better lighting and deeper pockets. The file from Gordon Banks sat unopened on the counter for 2 days. Not because Darius didn't care, because he cared too much. That night, he called a closed-door meeting in the kitchen. No lights on, just the amber glow from the vent hood and the sound of the cooler humming behind them. Isaiah sat with his arms crossed. Joe leaned against the stainless steel table. Charisse stood near the back, phone off. He's serious, Darius said. He'll build something that looks like Ellie's. Probably cleaner, slicker, but it won't be her. Isaiah spoke first. Then why even consider the offer? Because if he builds it, and it fails, it stains her name anyway, Darius replied. And if it works, we get buried. The room went still. Joe finally said, He's not after Ellie. He's after you. Yeah, Darius said, and he knows how to get under my skin. Mavis entered quietly and set down a piece of paper. It was a printout, a scanned excerpt from Ellie's journal. You don't fight shadows with fire. You fight them by feeding light to everything they try to block. They stared at it. So what's the light? Charisse asked. Darius stood taller. We go public. Full relaunch. Show the community what Ellie's table is about. Loud, proud, and local, Joe added. And we don't wait for him to build next door. We make sure next door is already full. Flyers went up across South Atlanta, hand-delivered to barbershops, churches, shelters, community centers. No hashtags, no sponsors, just bold letters. Ellie's table, 1 day, 1 block, all heart. The morning of the event, Joe arrived early to find Reggie already setting up tables. Tiana was hanging string lights between power poles. Charisse and Malik were stacking boxes of produce donated from a local urban farm. By noon, the block was alive. Not with hype, but with history. Old-school jams pumped from borrowed speakers. Kids darted between rows of folding chairs. Food stations lined the curb, catfish, collards, cornbread, and peach tea on ice. A muralist painted live on a blank brick wall. Ellie's face coming into color, framed by steam and oak trees. Darius stood near the grill, sleeves rolled, sweat on his brow, flipping ribs while talking to 2 high schoolers shadowing for their culinary elective. This isn't a showcase, he told them. It's a mirror. Look close. You belong here. Then came the speech. Darius stepped onto a wooden crate near the old telephone pole. The music faded. The crowd turned. Ellie Ellington believed food could heal, could teach, could welcome. That's what this place stands for. Not profits, not polish, but purpose. He raised a cup of tea. So today, we don't launch a business. We celebrate a promise. This is Ellie's table. Welcome home. The cheers rose like thunder. But not every plate served that day came without tension. Near the back fence, someone watched from inside a parked black car. It was Gordon Banks. He rolled down his window, snapped a photo, and made a call. Yeah, they're doing numbers. Good visuals, too. No, not worried. Let them have today. Tomorrow we move. Inside the celebration, no one noticed. Until the next morning, a cease and desist letter slid under the diner door. Banks was claiming infringement over the name. Joe read the document, then looked at Darius. He's not playing fair. Darius set the paper down slowly. Good, he said. Neither are we. The team sat around the big table in the back room, the one Ellie once used for Sunday prep. The cease and desist letter sat in the middle, its presence louder than any shouting. Joe folded her arms. We fight this. We get a lawyer. Isaiah nodded. And we rally the community. Let folks know what's happening. Mavis said, we don't make noise. We make meaning. Loud meaning. Darius remained quiet. Then he picked up the letter and tore it in half. Let him sue. But before that court date hits, I want every person in Atlanta to know Ellie's table by taste, not by logo. They launched a campaign. Flyers again. Pop-ups in church basements and barbershops. A series called Pass the Plate, where customers bought meals forward for someone else. But just as momentum began to rise, Charisse stopped showing up. Joe noticed first. Tried calling. No answer. Then came the text from an unknown number. Sorry. Can't risk the fallout. Gordon offered real money. I signed. Tell Darius I'm out. Darius sat in the dark dining room that night. Just him, one lamp, and a glass of peach tea that had long gone warm. Joe came in silent. She was our future, he said. Savannah was hers. She was scared, Joe replied. Fear makes people forget where they came from. He didn't respond right away. Then he said, I don't blame her, but I don't forget either. The next morning, Ellie's table posted a simple message on their window and socials. The table isn't broken, just lost a seat. We've got room for more. Charisse's absence echoed louder than any slam of a door. Her locker was left untouched, apron still hanging, recipe notes scattered like forgotten promises. Isaiah ran his hand over the butcher block counter. We trusted her. Joe sighed. She trusted herself more. Doesn't make her evil. Just gone. But the team felt the shift. Customers asked where she went. Reggie overheard two teens in line say, Guess even Ellie's table has cracks. That night, Darius called a team huddle. No anger. No speeches. One chair empty don't mean the table's broken, he said. But we do need to fix the leg that shook. 2 days later, Mavis received a letter in the mail. Handwritten. Smelled faintly of ash and lavender. It was from Amari Bennett, a former inmate Ellie mentored years ago through a prison writing program. Ms. Ellie once told me if I ever came home hungry for purpose, her table would be waiting. Is it? Mavis handed it to Darius, without a word. Invite her, he said. No interviews. No tests. Just invite her. Amari arrived with a notebook, a duffel bag, and eyes that had seen too much, but still glowed with hope. Reggie handed her an apron. Kendall cleared a space beside him at the prep sink. First shift's always the hardest, he said. But nobody eats alone here. She nodded. I don't plan to. And just like that, the table grew again. Amari's second week at Ellie's table brought rhythm. She prepped early, served with precision, and earned quiet respect. But behind her eyes was weight, something unspoken. One night after closing, Joe noticed her sitting alone in the pantry, notebook open, but nothing written. You okay? Amari didn't look up. Just remembering what I owe. Joe sat beside her. You don't have to explain. Amari shook her head. It's not that. There's someone else. Someone Ellie knew. Back then, we were both in her writing group. He called me last night. Who? Amari finally looked up. His name's Marcus Wynn. He says he's Ellie's grandson. Joe froze. Ellie never had children. That's what I said. But he says his mama was her foster kid. And he's got letters. Marcus arrived 3 days later. Tall, neatly dressed, polished, but not cold. He stood in the dining room and looked around like it was familiar. My mama never wanted me to come here. Said it would stir things. But I need to know if I'm standing in the kitchen my grandmother built. He handed Darius a folder. Inside letters, photos, A picture of Ellie with a young girl, maybe 16, smiling but distant. Joe flipped through them, her hand trembling. Mavis whispered, "That's her, from before she got sick." The silence that followed wasn't disbelief. It was recognition. Marcus returned the next day, alone. No folder, no proof, just a soft stare and a worn envelope. "This," he said, placing it on the counter, "is the last thing she sent my mom. Dated 2 weeks before Ellie passed." Darius opened it slowly. Inside, a handwritten note. "Blood doesn't make you mine. Showing up does. But if you ever need to know where you came from, tell them I called you my boy." Ellie. Nobody spoke. Mavis pressed a napkin to her mouth. Joe blinked hard. Marcus shifted, unsure. "I'm not here to take anything. Just wondering if I can help keep it alive." Darius looked up. "Then you'd better bring an apron." Later that week, during prep, Marcus stood beside Amari. She watched him slice onions. Not great, but careful. "You cook much?" "Mostly microwaves and YouTube disasters." She laughed. "Then this'll hurt your pride. But here." She took his hand, guided the knife. "This is Ellie's way." Joe passed by, watching. "Don't teach him too much. He might outcook you." "He's got a long road," Amari replied. "But he's got time." It was the kind of morning that smelled like decision. Crisp, smoky, touched with fried garlic and worry. Ellie's table buzzed with movement, extra polish on the counter, music a notch lower, aprons freshly pressed. The city councilwoman was due at 11. Councilwoman Rena Stokes, known for backing small businesses, until she didn't. Her visit meant funding, recognition, protection, or silence. Darius briefed the crew like a general. "She's not just coming to eat. She's coming to feel what this place stands for. So show her." But tension simmered beneath the surface. Isaiah watched Marcus from across the prep line. He hadn't said much since Marcus arrived, but his glances spoke volumes. Doubt, caution, a hint of something else. Marcus, oblivious or choosing to be, focused on slicing cucumbers. Joe caught Isaiah's stare. "What's up?" He shrugged, still trying to figure out how somebody shows up out of nowhere and gets trusted like that. "He didn't ask for trust," Joe said. "He's earning it." "Maybe. But Ellie ain't here to say yes or no." Before Joe could reply, the bell over the door jingled. Rena Stokes walked in. Councilwoman Stokes didn't smile much. She took in the room like she was already judging the Yelp score. Darius greeted her warmly. "Councilwoman, welcome." She nodded. "Let's see what you've got." The meal began simply. Catfish bites, collards, sweet tea so cold it sweat on the glass. She chewed slowly. Looked around. Atmosphere's humble. Honest. Isaiah stepped up to refill her glass. Stokes looked him over. "You from here?" "Born 3 blocks down," he said. She nodded. "I like that." Then Marcus approached with a tray of peach cobbler. "Dessert." She paused. "You the chef?" "I'm learning," he said. She tilted her head. "Your face looks familiar." Amari tensed. Isaiah folded his arms. Darius stepped in. "He's part of our team." Stokes gave a long, slow blink. "I see." She took the cobbler, took a bite, then stood. "Good food. Better people. Real roots." Darius exhaled. "I'll be back," she said. "And I'll bring someone else. Someone who needs to feel what I just felt." She left with no further word. Marcus turned to Isaiah. "I didn't mean to step in your space." Isaiah nodded slowly. "Just step up. That's all I care about." And just like that, the kitchen clock ticked into something new. Councilwoman Stokes returned exactly 6 days later. This time, she didn't come alone. A tall woman stepped in behind her, brown skin, salt and pepper locks pulled back, tailored suit sharp as a whisper. Her name was Evelyn Ray. Mavis gasped before the name even left Stokes' lips. "Evelyn." Evelyn's eyes swept the room. "Didn't think I'd be back here." Joe stepped forward. "Who is she?" Mavis looked stunned. "Ellie's half-sister." The room quieted. Even the grill stopped sizzling for a breath. Evelyn looked around, chin raised. "Last time I saw this kitchen, we were arguing over cornbread. Ellie said brown sugar didn't belong." I said she was bland. Amari cracked a nervous smile. Darius motioned toward the table. Come sit. Evelyn stayed standing. I didn't come for a meal. I came because Rena said Ellie's spirit was still in here. I had to see for myself. Her voice dipped lower. I never made peace with her. Thought there'd be time. Then there wasn't. Mavis touched her shoulder gently. Ellie made peace with you, even if she never mailed the words. Evelyn finally sat. The weight of grief softened her frame. I don't want ownership or credit. I want to help. Quietly. Behind the curtain, like Ellie used to do. Darius smiled slowly. There's always room at the back line. Evelyn Ray moved through the kitchen like a woman walking back into a memory. She didn't rush. She paused at the spice rack, the cooling rack, the mason jars Ellie used for pickled okra. Finally, she stood in front of the recipe box. Wooden, old, carved initials barely legible on the side, Yummy. Joe nodded toward it. We've been through it, top to bottom. But if you're looking for something. Evelyn didn't answer right away. She opened the box, flipped past the stained index cards, found a gap near the back where the dividers skipped a letter. Right here, she whispered. It's missing. Darius stepped closer. What? Evelyn looked up. Ellie's hushberry cake. No one served it since '89. She said the recipe wasn't on paper. She said we weren't ready. Amari leaned forward. What even is hushberry? Evelyn smiled softly. It's not a berry. It's a moment. Sweetness you don't speak about. Just taste. Joe reached across. Then how do we bring it back? Evelyn placed a single folded slip of paper on the counter. She gave me this, she said, the night before she passed. Said not to open it till I believed the grill had its soul back. Everyone went quiet. Evelyn unfolded it slowly. Inside wasn't just a recipe. It was a letter. If they're reading this, it means they remembered the table was always more than food. It was a place to listen, a place to wait. Tell them the secret's not the spice. It's the pause between steps. Let them cook that into every plate. Ellie. And under that, handwritten in block letters, hushberry cake. Serve only on Sundays. Share only in silence. Evelyn looked at Darius. Sunday's coming. He nodded. Let's get quiet. Sunday dawned quiet. The kind of quiet that wrapped around the heart like warm linen. No music played in the kitchen. No one joked or cursed or clanged pans. Just breath and motion. The recipe card sat on the prep table under glass, like a relic. Ellie's block letters visible through the pane. Evelyn stood at the mixer. Joe sifted. Amari beat eggs. Marcus laid out pecans, exact and slow. Darius didn't touch a thing. He just watched. Watched the way the room held its breath. The batter was thick, almost stubborn. They folded it in silence. When the oven closed, time warped. The air thickened with memory. It smelled like the '80s. Like a wake and a wedding. Like fall and forgiveness. At 1:13 p.m., the hushberry cake came out. Golden. Crisp at the edges. Sunk slightly in the middle like a prayer bowed in thanks. Joe sliced the first piece. Placed it on a plate. And carried it to the table by the window, Ellie's old booth. No one sat there. They just looked at it. Let it rest. Let it be. A few customers entered. No menus. Just eyes on the plate. Amari whispered, Do we serve it now? Darius shook his head. No. Then he looked to Evelyn. She nodded. He walked to the table. Sat down. Cut a forkful. Tasted. Closed his eyes. And smiled. He stood. Looked at the team. Now we serve. By Wednesday, the hushberry cake had done something no dish ever had. It brought in the quiet ones. People who didn't order, just stared. Some cried. Others offered stories with trembling hands. Ellie once made me this when I came home from rehab. Or she baked it the week my mama died. Then he showed up. Slick suit. Smooth voice. But his eyes, they scanned the walls like they were missing something. I'm looking for Darius Ellington. Darius stepped forward. That's me. The man extended a card. Victor Lane, estate attorney. Specialized in culinary intellectual property. I represent a claim against your use of the hushberry recipe. Silence. What claim? Darius asked. Victor smiled, but there was no kindness in it. My client says the recipe belongs to him. Says it was stolen from his grandmother, who once worked here, before Ellie ever called it hers. Mavis stood slowly. Who's the client? Victor didn't blink. Elias Monroe, Ellie's first kitchen apprentice, and her godson. Elias Monroe didn't show up angry. He showed up sure, wearing a vintage leather apron and holding a thick manila folder filled with contracts, emails, and what he called recorded conversations. Darius called a closed-door meeting. Joe, Mavis, Evelyn, Amari, and Kendall sat at the long prep table, the same table Ellie used to roll biscuit dough and settle arguments. Elias placed the folder down. Ellie taught me everything I know. Said I'd be the one to carry it. The cake, the flavor, the name. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. Funny, she never said that to her own sister. That's 'cause she didn't trust blood. Said family was who stayed when you failed. Elias looked around the room. None of y'all were there that year. The one she closed the kitchen down for a whole month. Mavis leaned forward. That was the year her heart almost gave out. Elias nodded. And I cooked every meal while she recovered. I'm not here for money. I'm here for truth. Amari, quiet until now, spoke. So what truth you holding? Elias reached into the folder and pulled out a photo. It was faded, but clear enough. Ellie, standing in the kitchen, arm around Elias. Young, bright-eyed, and in her other hand, a plate, a single slice of hushberry cake. Joe took it gently. That's the same plate we use on Sundays. Darius flipped the photo over, scribbled in Ellie's handwriting. First cake, first air. Dated 1984. The room was stunned. Elias placed one more paper on the table, a letter signed by Ellie. If anything happens to me, Elias will have final say on the hushberry. The air went still. Then Evelyn stood up. That's not the end of the letter. She pulled something from her coat pocket, a second sheet, torn from the same stationery. The handwriting matched, but only if he remembers why the silence matters. If he turns it into noise, into fame, into ego, it dies with me. Elias stepped back. Darius looked at him. So, you want legacy? Then answer this. Why was it called Hushberry? Elias stared at the floor and said nothing. The room held its breath. Elias stared at the floor, words failing him. Then Mavis, silent for most of the exchange, slowly reached into her handbag. I didn't think I'd ever need this, she said. Ellie gave it to me 6 days before she passed. Told me not to play it unless the hushberry ever became more noise than nourishment. It was a small voice recorder, dusty, the kind they don't make anymore. Mavis pressed play. Ellie's voice crackled through the speaker, soft but clear. If you're listening to this, then the cake's on the table again. Maybe you brought it back right. Maybe you didn't. But listen close now. 'Cause hushberry ain't about taste. It's about stillness. About honoring what don't need a spotlight. I named it Hushberry 'cause that Sunday long ago, we all sat quiet at my mama's table. No one said a word. We were grieving, and that slice that held us together. So I swore, only serve it when the silence means something. A long pause. Then Ellie chuckled lightly. Don't let anybody claim it unless they understand what it healed. The recorder clicked off. Elias's jaw clenched. His hand curled into a fist, then slowly loosened. I didn't know, he said. She never told me that. Evelyn stepped forward. She was waiting for you to listen first. Darius turned to the team. We vote now. Not just on Elias, on what comes next. One by one, hands were raised. Silent, steady. They wouldn't erase Elias, but they wouldn't hand him the keys either. He would stay and learn, because legacy can't be claimed. It has to be earned. It was Thursday morning when the bell over the door rang, and a stranger stepped into the grill. Black coat, messenger bag, wire-rimmed glasses, eyes that had seen too much too young. He introduced himself with a card. Trenton Cole, independent journalist. Southern Legacy Project. I'm working on a piece about black matriarchs and food as generational language, he said. But something about this place feels heavier. Darius nodded slowly. You're not wrong. Trenton took a seat at the counter, ordered hushberry, and unzipped his bag. I found something. Came from a retired courthouse clerk in Athens. Thought it was junk, but... He slid over a sealed envelope. Yellowed. Torn at the corner. The name written on the front in ink, Ellen M. Ellington. Inside was a photo. Grainy. 1963. Ellie is a teenager. But not at a kitchen. At a march. Selma. Arms linked with two other girls. One was Joanne. The other? Evelyn whispered first. That's my mother. The entire room fell into a silence older than the booth seats. Trenton pulled out a second slip of paper. A quote. Feed them, and they might march. Teach them to cook. They'll stay fed for a revolution. Mavis sat down hard. She was building more than a grill, she said. Trenton nodded. She was building resistance. The photo had barely settled on the counter when Darius spoke. She never said anything about a basement. Evelyn frowned. This building's been standing since 1924. You think a woman like Ellie didn't know how to hide things? They cleared the back pantry by dusk. Behind the dry goods, past the aging mop sink, beneath a warped floor tile, was a rusted ring. A handle. Joe tugged. It groaned like something sacred had waited too long. Dust fell. Wood splintered. A hatch opened into a narrow stairwell. Kendall fetched a flashlight. Darius went first. The air was cold. Thick. Smelled of iron and old citrus. At the bottom, shelves. Jars. Tins. And a trunk. Mavis exhaled sharply. That trunk was hers. I remember. They opened it slowly. Inside, paper after paper. Laminated menus. Napkin sketches. Guest names in Ellie's cursive. Clippings from civil rights meetings, disguised as supper club flyers. A journal. Darius opened to the first page. If they ever come looking, let them find what mattered. Let them find our names. Then Evelyn lifted something wrapped in cloth. It was a cast iron pan. On the bottom, etched in steel. Fed for freedom. Joe spoke, barely above a whisper. She fed the marchers. The children. The ones who couldn't march. She fed the fire. Mavis wiped a tear. That's why she called it Ellie's Grill. Not after herself. After all of us. They brought everything upstairs, carefully. The journal. The flyers. The pan. Darius placed them on the big table in the dining room, the same one Ellie used to run inventory on Sunday nights. They circled it like a council of memory keepers. What now? Joe asked. Silence. Do we share it? Evelyn asked. Or protect it? Mavis rubbed her temple. You know what happens when the wrong people get a hold of our stories. They don't preserve. They package. Amari nodded. They'll turn her struggle into content. Call it a hidden civil rights kitchen, and slap it on a travel blog. Kendall cleared his throat. But if we don't share it, don't we become what we're afraid of? Keeping it locked away. Everyone looked to Darius. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped to the counter, pulled out a battered recipe card from Ellie's box, and read it aloud. History feeds us twice, once with truth, once with memory. Choose which one you serve. He looked up. We curate it. Ourselves. Not a documentary crew. Not a museum we don't trust. We tell the story our way. At our pace. Mavis nodded. We make it a table, not a spectacle. Darius turned to Kendall. You and Amari are in charge of digitizing the archive. Joe, you help Evelyn transcribe the journal. Mavis, you help me write the preface. The real one. They all agreed. Outside, a storm had started. But inside the grill, the light stayed on. Not for show. For remembering.